This paper, Criticizing Architectural Criticism, Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art, examines the adoption of modern architecture at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Tehran, and the countervailing effects of the inspiration from American examples and Iranian traditional principles upon its architectural design. Some Iranian historians claim that the architecture of the building is inspired by Iranian wind catchers. This paper argues that architecture critics have failed to test this assertion. This paper attempts to clarify the main source of inspiration for the half-barrel vault form skylights in Kamran Diba's Museum of Contemporary Art. Nawawi 7 times postulates a connection between the style of the museum and traditional Iranian architecture, but only in the notes does he reluctantly mention the similarities to a building designed for contemporary art in Barcelona, which was designed by José Luis Sert. The last two sentences of this paragraph are hard to accept, especially the last sentence, in which it is claimed that the Tehran Museum provides a stronger link with Iranian architecture, as if Sert was expected to design an Iranian-style building, but failed. Nawawi seems to have seen traditional Iranian architecture as the main source for shaping both designs, one of them more successfully. To assess what Oriental architecture Sert might have been influenced by, it is useful to consider his biography, works, and professional background. The use of a patio and the inner courtyard in his works, such as the houses in Venezuela, the Sert house in Cambridge, and the houses in Punta Martinet, was a result of Sert's familiarity with Mediterranean vernacular models in meeting special climate conditions and cultural demands. Beside the patio, there was another architectural element in almost all of his late works, as if it was his architectural signature, a half-barrel vault form, usually as a skylight. A variety of uses of quarter circular skylights in his works, such as the studio for Jean Miro in 1955, the house for Georges Barak in France in 1960, and the Charles River campus of Boston University in 1960-65 show how persistent this element was in his architecture. Sert was invited to and attended in the 1974 Architectural Congress in Iran, most probably by Kamran Diba himself as one of the organizers. In an interview, Kamran Diba himself acknowledges that his design is not very original. He, however, mentions no specific source rather than the role of the architectural prophets, Le Corbusier and Frank Lloyd Wright. Diba admits that one of the officials who saw his model of the museum told him that the skylights in the scale model of the museum reminded him traditional wind catchers in Yaz, in the center of the Iranian desert. Now this idea dominates almost every scholarly view. It is difficult to find an article that does not mention wind catchers as a source of inspiration for Diba's design. The highly sophisticated use of wind catchers is a significant part of historical character of Iranianity in architecture. Admiration of successful achievement by an Iranian architect inhibits Iranian architectural historians from examining the real connection of the design with traditional Iranian elements, and the literature bears this out. Regardless of the nationalistic attempts of some scholars to ignore the relevance of Jean Miro Foundation as the source, they might be right if we look at another work of Sert in France, which its close similarity to the Tehran Museum, even with any ideological lens of view, cannot be easily ignored. The Fondation Maguette, designed in 1958. The quarry stones covered both facades of these buildings, which were as far as the two different continents. The same form of the skylights and exposed concrete as the material used in exterior and interior for both buildings. All suggest the Western origin of the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art. You can see here on the left is the museum in France, and on the right side you can see the Tehran Museum. As a result, no fantastic perception of presuming the traditional Persian concept of the wind catchers for skylights is valid anymore, and the claims of the architect himself are hard to be accepted. Though Diba admits that Cirque's design in Saint-Paul-de-Vence in the southeast of France was a source of inspiration for him, Diba does not go in detail to explain the origin of the skylights, and he only admires Cirque's building because of its garden and its scale, which would be consistent with the Tehran Museum. A closer look at the modern sculpture in the Tehran Museum tells us the same story. The sculptor of both sides is Alberto Giacometti, a Swiss modern artist who, like Cirque, had contacts with Pablo Picasso in the early 20th century. It seems that not only Diba wanted to import the skylights, but he also imported its gardens and sculptures. These photographs shows the museum in France are quite similar to sculptures in Tehran Museum. Despite borrowing the idea of the ramps between the galleries from the Guggenheim Museum and the skylights and the facade material from Cirque's Fondation Maquette, the Tehran Museum has its unique, highly geometrically designed floor plans that recalls the geometrical composition of traditional Iranian architecture. However, this most distinguishable feature of Diba's design has been overshadowed by the other architectural elements that were not novel in design. Diba compares architects to poets, whose artistic works value due to the composition rather than the invention of words. And he somewhat acknowledges that he was not the creator of the architectural elements. Cirque himself was not the only architect who used this kind of skylights, as they can be found in the Bauhaus archive designed by Walter Gropius, and a similar curved form at the roof of Le Corbusier's governor's palace is another example. Diba might borrow some elements, such as the half-barrel vault-formed skylights, facade material, and sculptures, but he apparently can be counted as a master of composition, who incorporated a variety of architectural elements in an integrated design that features traditional Iranian character beside its modern appearance. The other elements of his design melted together in a way which, in comparison with its contemporaries, such as we can see here, such as the Modernist Museum of London, opened in 1976, this time Diba's work deserves to be regarded as a success and as an innovative masterpiece in its planning and composition. The Tehran Museum, with its anti-international style, was a context-specific architectural design, and in the categorization of regionalist works, the Tehran Museum falls into a group in which local architecture is modernized, which was admired by Frampton and Curtis in their definition of critical and authentic regionalism. Not only has Iranian nationalism had a direct impact on contemporary Iranian architecture, but also the theoretical influence of nationalism has made the Iranian styles partly skewed and emotionally changed. The lack of unbiased architectural criticism of the Museum of Contemporary Art can be attributed to the influence of Iranian nationalism. On the other hand, the museum by Diba, despite all of its similarities to a number of Euro-American modern museums, is still consistent with Iranian architecture in its unique planning and composition. Thank you for your attention. At the end, the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art is not too far from here, and I would like to suggest our foreign guests at this congress, if they have time, you can have a visit and you can experience the wonderful space through walking through the galleries.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. We would love to, and we will do for sure. No, it was very soon. Just but I give you more as a matter of discussion that as a suggestion is that in my opinion it was in my opinion copying other architects is part of architectural work. So it's something happens is very common to look at other architecture in order to make your own. And it's not something I will it make not less valuable the outcome. And
that's the point I was discussing, because I didn't actually criticize the architect. I criticized the architecture critics.
Okay.
Because I think what makes the Tehran Museum of Contemporary Art a masterpiece is not the skylines, but the planning and composition.
And also the inside space. Yes, I would love to go there.
That's a wonderful space to experience.
Maybe you can join and explain us a bit if you have time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Based on my colleague و صحبتایی که آقای دکتر فرمودن، یک نکته‌ای هست. من صحبتاشون هم سوالی که از من پرسیدن داشت این رو بیان میکنم، بعد برای دکترم یا توضیح خودم رو توضیح میدم. صحبت که دارم اینه که برخی از این آثار علاوه بر جنبه‌های واقعی خودشون دلایل تبلیغاتی هم در موفقیتشون هست. این به دلایلی در کتاب‌ها هی تکرار شدن. آیا شما فکر می‌کنید این اثر طراحیشه که باعث شهرتش شده یا نه تبلیغات پشت اثر بوده که باعث شهرت شده؟
یه مقدار فارسی جواب
فارسی من انگلیسی ترجمه
واقعیتش من مقایسه که کردم موزه هنرهای معاصر تهران رو با موزه‌هایی که هم عصرش ساخته شده بودن، مثلا توی لندن تقریبا همزمان با موزه هنرهای معاصر تهران یک موزه افتتاح شد که شما میتونید مقایسه کنید معماری شد. اینجا من خدمتتون بیارمش و ببینید چقدر در واقعیت این موزه قشنگتر و زیباتر طراحی شده. موزه تهران نسبت به این موزه بتونی تاریخ گذشته به لحاظ سبکی، این موزه‌ای که در اواخر دهه 80 میلادی توی لندن ساخته شده و ما موزه تهران همزمان داریم. خب این نشون میده که خیلی کم توجه شده به موزه هنرهای معاصر تهران با این طراحی قوی که داره در پلنش و در سازماندهی فضاهاش. و نقدی که من وارد کردم به منتقدان معماری این بود که به جای اینکه به اون پلان قوی و طرحریزی قوی ایرانی موزه هنرهای معاصر تهران پرداخته بشه، به شباهت نورگیرهای سقفی موزه هنرهای معاصر با بادگیرهای یزد تاکید شده و نشون دادم توی این مقاله که این نورگیرهای سقفی با این فرم وجود داشته در معماری مدرن و واترلیکویس استفاده کرده، تو کار به کوربوزیه شرقیش بوده و صرف در چندین ویلا و ساختمان‌های متفاوت اینا رو استفاده کرده. و این چیزی نیست که ما بگیم به خاطر این نورگیرهای سقفی موزه هنرهای معاصر یک شاهکاره، ولی بلکه شاهکار بودن موزه هنرهای معاصر به خاطر اینه که شما اصلا من با هیچ چیزی نمیتونستم اینو به قول ایلاستریت کنم، به تصویر بکشم تا توی موزه هنرهای معاصر شما قدم نزنید تو گالری و اون تفاوت و شکست نور رو احساس نکنید و اینکه یه دفعه سورپرایز بشید ببینید یه طبقه اومده پایین‌تر یا بالاتر بدون که متوجه بشید. اون موقع است میفهمید چقدر طراحی قوی داره. حالا من خودم موزه‌های زیادی رفتم این گوشه کناری که تو استرالیا بودیم، تو هر جا می‌رفتم فقط موزه می‌رفتم. واقعیتش یکی از بهترین موزه‌ای که تو عمرم دیدم همین موزه هنرهای معاصر تهران است.
خیلی ممنون.